During the wedding preparations, my daughter Amanda looked me straight in the eye and said words that shattered my world. "Your life is nothing to be proud of. Just a nobody teacher in a small house for 40 years. The Caldwells have real success. I need to fit in their world now." Her voice turned cold. "Don't show up at all." I just stood there, the room spinning around me. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces as I looked at this stranger wearing my daughter's face. I simply nodded, turned, and walked away. But in that moment of crushing silence, something changed inside me. A plan began to form. I never thought I'd see the day when my own flesh and blood would dismiss my entire existence as worthless. But I guess life has a way of surprising you, even at 67 years old. My name is Everett Wilson. For 40 years, I taught American history at Lincoln High School in our modest suburban community. Not exactly a glamorous career, but I loved every minute of it. Watching young minds connect with the past and understand how it shapes our present gave me a sense of purpose that no paycheck could match. My wife Sarah and I bought our small 3-bedroom house when we first got married. We had plans to upgrade eventually, but life had other ideas. Sarah was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer when Amanda was just 12. For 2 years, we fought that battle together as a family, but in the end, we lost her. Amanda was 14 when her mother passed away. Those first few years were impossibly hard. I became both mother and father overnight, trying my best to help a teenage girl navigate her grief while managing my own. I took on tutoring jobs in the evenings and coached the debate team for extra income. Every spare penny went toward making sure Amanda had what she needed, both emotionally and materially. When she got accepted to Westlake University, a prestigious private college, I couldn't have been prouder. It was expensive, beyond what my teacher's salary could comfortably afford, but I made it work. I took out a second mortgage, canceled my plans to finally renovate our aging kitchen, and picked up weekend work at a local bookstore. Amanda graduated with honors in business marketing, and I sat in that audience feeling like the richest man alive despite my dwindling bank account. After college, Amanda moved to the city and landed a job at a high-end marketing firm. Our relationship changed as she built her new life, but I understood. That's what children do. They grow up in a way. Our Sunday phone calls became monthly, then sporadic. Still, when she called last year to tell me she'd met someone special, I felt that familiar surge of fatherly joy. Tyler Caldwell was everything a father could want for his daughter on paper. Ivy League educated, junior partner at a prestigious investment firm, impeccable manners. When Amanda first brought him home, I tried my best to make a good impression. I spent 3 days cleaning the house, prepared Sarah's famous pot roast recipe, and even bought a new shirt for the occasion. I watched Tyler's eyes take in our modest living room with its dated furniture and family photos. He was polite, shaking my hand firmly and complimenting the meal. But I caught the slight hesitation in his voice when Amanda proudly told him I'd been a teacher all my life. It was at a dinner 2 months later, when Amanda announced their engagement, that I first noticed the change in her. Tyler had brought his parents, the Caldwells, to meet me. They arrived in a car that probably cost more than my house, dressed like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Mrs. Caldwell, Patricia, made a show of examining our neighborhood before entering, commenting on how quaint it was in a tone that suggested she meant something entirely different. During dinner, I shared some stories about my years teaching, including how one of my former students had recently been elected to state senate and had written me a heartfelt letter of thanks. As I was speaking, I noticed Amanda shifting uncomfortably in her seat, casting nervous glances toward Tyler's parents. When I mentioned the ancient station wagon I still drove to school each day, the one Sarah and I had bought together the year before Amanda was born, I saw my daughter visibly cringe. Later that night, after the Caldwells had left, Amanda cornered me in the kitchen. "Dad, was it really necessary to go on and on about your teaching stories?" she asked, her voice tight with irritation. I was taken aback. "What do you mean? I thought they were interested. The senator story is one of my favorites." "They weren't interested, Dad. Tyler's father runs a hedge fund that manages billions of dollars. His mother sits on the board of the art museum. They were just being polite." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "You embarrassed me tonight." Her words hit like a physical blow. Embarrassed her? In all our years together, through all the hardships, I'd never once thought my daughter was ashamed of me. "I'm sorry, Amanda," I said quietly. "I didn't realize." She seemed to soften slightly. "It's fine. Just, maybe next time, let them do more of the talking? They have so much more interesting lives than us." Us. That word hung in the air between us. Somehow, in the space of a few months, my daughter had created a division I never saw coming. And as she turned to leave, I had the strange feeling I was watching someone I didn't recognize anymore. I had no idea then that this was only the beginning of a transformation that would eventually lead to the most painful moment of my life since losing Sarah, and to a decision that would change everything. The wedding planning began almost immediately. One evening after the engagement, Amanda called me with excitement in her voice that reminded me of her childhood. "Dad, I know you've been saving for this day since I was little," she said, "and I want you to know how much that means to me." It was true. Despite our modest means, I'd set aside a portion of every paycheck since Amanda was born, dreaming of the day I'd see her walk down the aisle. Over the years, those small deposits had grown into a respectable sum, enough for what I thought would be a beautiful celebration. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I've got nearly $80,000 saved. I want you to have the wedding you've always dreamed of." There was a pause on the line. "Dad, that's so generous." I couldn't see her face, but something in her voice gave me pause. Was it disappointment? "Is that not enough?" I asked hesitantly. No, it's wonderful," she rushed to say. "We might need to be a bit creative with the budget, that's all. The venues Tyler and I are looking at, well, they're special." That was my first clue that Amanda's vision of her wedding might exceed my carefully saved funds. But I was determined to give her everything I could. Within weeks, I found myself seated at an elegant restaurant with Amanda, Tyler, and his parents, discussing wedding plans. Patricia Caldwell had brought a leather-bound planner filled with ideas and contact information for what she called the essential vendors. "Now, Everett," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, "the Forest Brook Country Club is really the only suitable venue for a wedding of this caliber. We've been members for 20 years, and they give preference to family connections." I nodded politely, trying to ignore the unspoken implication that my daughter was marrying up into a world I didn't belong in. When the event coordinator presented the estimated cost for the venue alone, $60,000, I nearly choked on my water. "That's quite an investment," I managed to say. Patricia waved a manicured hand dismissively. "It's what these things cost, Everett. Quality can't be compromised on such an important day." I glanced at Amanda, expecting her to suggest something more reasonable, but she was nodding along with her future mother-in-law, eyes bright with excitement. Later that week, I visited my bank and applied to refinance my home. The loan officer, Janet, had been handling my accounts for years and looked concerned as she reviewed my application. "Everett, are you sure about this? You're almost at retirement age," she pointed out gently. "Taking on new debt now." "I know, Janet," I said with a smile I didn't entirely feel. "But it's for my only daughter's wedding. What else would I spend it on?" As the weeks passed, I found myself increasingly sidelined in the planning process, while still receiving all the bills. Amanda and Patricia formed a planning alliance, consulting me only when it was time to write another check. The cost spiraled beyond anything I had imagined. Tyler insisted on a top-shelf open bar, Patricia added a string quartet for the cocktail hour, and Amanda selected floral arrangements that cost more than 3 months of my mortgage payments. At one planning meeting, I tentatively suggested scaling back on some elements. "Honey, maybe we could reconsider the ice sculpture?" I offered. "Or perhaps fewer courses at dinner?" Amanda exchanged a look with Patricia that made my stomach sink. "Dad, Tyler and I both agree. This is a statement event. All of Tyler's family business connections will be there. We can't cut corners." I bit back the words that rose to my mind that teaching children had been my life's work, and it had never been about making statements. Instead, I simply nodded and wrote another check. The real conflict arose when we discussed the rehearsal dinner. Traditionally, this was hosted by the groom's family, but Patricia had other ideas. "We feel, given the caliber of guests attending, that the rehearsal dinner should be at the Royal Oak Club," she announced at yet another planning lunch. "They've quoted us $14,000 for a minimal setup." I cleared my throat. "Actually, I was hoping to host the rehearsal dinner at my home. I've already spoken with a local caterer. I've been working on the backyard all spring, planting Sarah's favorite flowers. I thought it would be nice. A personal touch." Amanda looked horrified. "Dad, you're not serious. The house is tiny. And the backyard? For Tyler's family?" I tried to explain how much it would mean to me, to honor Sarah's memory by hosting in the home wedge shared, surrounded by her garden. "No one wants to drive all the way out to your neighborhood, Dad," Amanda said firmly. "And honestly, the house isn't. It's not what people will be expecting." "But Sarah would have," I began. Mom has been gone for over 10 years, Amanda cut me off. This isn't about her. It's about my future with Tyler. I fell silent, wounded beyond words. In that moment, I realized my daughter wasn't just rejecting my home. She was rejecting the life her mother and I had built together, the values we had tried to instill in her. After much discussion, I reluctantly agreed to fund the rehearsal dinner at the Royal Oak Club, doubling the already stretched budget. When I wrote that check, I thought I'd seen the worst of Amanda's transformation. I was wrong. The worst was yet to come, in a moment that would push me past my breaking point and force me to make a decision I never thought I would face. 6 weeks before the wedding, Amanda called to tell me she'd finally found her perfect dress, and the bridal shop was holding a special viewing for family. Despite everything, my heart leapt at the chance to be included in this milestone moment. I took the afternoon off from school, put on my best jacket, and drove the 40 minutes to the upscale boutique in the city. The shop was located in an exclusive shopping district, where I immediately felt out of place. As I parked my ancient station wagon between gleaming luxury vehicles, I caught sight of Patricia Caldwell watching me from the boutique entrance, her expression a mixture of amusement and distaste. "Everett," she greeted me with an air kiss. "How resourceful of you to keep that car running all these years." "It has sentimental value," I replied simply. "Sarah and I bought it together." She gave a tight smile. "Well, it certainly makes a statement." Inside, the boutique was all white carpet and champagne flutes, with a special platform surrounded by mirrors where I assumed Amanda would model her dress. Tyler's father, Richard, was already there, looking completely at ease in a custom suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He acknowledged me with a curt nod but didn't bother with conversation. A store attendant offered me champagne, which I declined, opting instead for water. As I waited, I overheard Patricia speaking with another woman I didn't recognize. "Amanda's father is a history teacher," she said in a stage whisper. "Can you imagine? 40 years in the same position. No ambition whatsoever." I pretended not to hear, though the words stung more than I wanted to admit. When Amanda finally emerged in her gown, my breath caught in my throat. For a moment, she was my little girl again, twirling in the princess costume I'd saved for months to buy her for Halloween. The dress was elaborate layers of silk and lace with crystal embellishments that caught the light. It was clearly expensive, far more than the budget we'd discussed, but seeing her happiness, I couldn't bring myself to care. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Just like your mother." Amanda's smile faltered slightly. "Dad, Mom wore a simple dress from a department store. This is a custom Vera Wang." I fell silent, wounded by her dismissal of one of my most precious memories. Sarah, radiant in the dress she'd chosen, walking toward me on our wedding day. While Amanda returned to the dressing room, I took a seat in the waiting area. Through the partially open door to a private consultation room, I could hear Amanda and Patricia speaking. Curious, I moved closer, then froze when I heard my name. "What about the father-daughter dance?" Patricia was asking. "Have you selected a song?" I heard Amanda sigh. "I'm thinking of skipping it, actually. Dad doesn't know how to dance properly anyway. He'd just embarrass himself, and me." "Good thinking," Patricia agreed. "And the walking down the aisle bit, we should make sure he understands he needs to step aside immediately after. The photographer doesn't need him in all the ceremony shots." "Exactly," Amanda said. "We can minimize his visibility. Tyler's father looks so much better in formal wear anyway." I stepped back, feeling as though I'd been punched in the stomach. The champagne flutes on a nearby table blurred as tears threatened to form in my eyes. I took several deep breaths, composing myself before Amanda emerged. When she returned, wearing her street clothes again, I confronted her as gently as I could. "Amanda, I overheard what you said about the father-daughter dance, and about minimizing my visibility." Her face flushed, first with embarrassment, then defensiveness. "You were eavesdropping?" "Not intentionally, but I heard enough." I kept my voice low, aware of the boutique staff nearby. "Is that how you see me? As someone to hide away?" "You're overreacting, Dad," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Wedding planning is stressful, and there are a lot of moving parts to consider." "Moving parts? I'm your father." She glanced around nervously, clearly concerned someone might overhear. "We can talk about this later. Now isn't the time." I dropped it, not wanting to cause a scene, but the conversation left a hollow feeling in my chest that stayed with me for days afterward. The following week, I drove to Amanda's apartment with a box of old family photos. She'd mentioned creating a memory display for the reception, and I'd spent hours selecting pictures that told our family's story, Sarah holding newborn Amanda, her first steps, school performances I'd attended, with a camcorder in hand, her college graduation with me, standing proudly beside her. When I arrived, Amanda wasn't home. Her roommate, Jessica, let me in, saying Amanda was running late but had told her I could leave the photos. I placed the carefully curated box on Amanda's dining table and was about to leave when I noticed a familiar-looking envelope in the trash can. Something made me reach for it. Inside was a handwritten note from Patricia Caldwell, paper-clipped to what appeared to be professional family portraits of the Caldwell family at various society events. "Amanda, darling," the note read, "I've selected some more appropriate photos for the memory display. No need to use those old snapshots. These will create a much more elegant impression for the guests. Let's keep the visual story consistent with the caliber of the event." With a sinking feeling, I looked back at the box I'd brought. Underneath it was another box, already opened, containing the photos I'd selected. They had been taken out, examined, and discarded. Standing there in my daughter's apartment, holding physical evidence that the life we'd shared was being erased, something broke inside me. Not just my heart, but a fundamental trust that had always existed between us. My daughter, my Amanda, wasn't just embarrassed by me. She was actively working to remove all traces of our life together from her future. I left without waiting for her to return, the box of photos still on the table. I didn't call or text to explain my visit. I drove home in silence, the weight of realization pressing down on me with each passing mile. The Amanda I'd raised, the one who'd held my hand at her mother's funeral and promised we'd always have each other, was gone. In her place was a stranger who saw me as an inconvenience to be managed, a blemish on her perfect new life. Little did I know that the true breaking point was still to come, a moment so painful it would force me to make a decision I never thought possible. The final dress rehearsal took place 2 days before the wedding. The Forest Brook Country Club was decorated with elaborate floral arrangements, crystal chandeliers catching the late afternoon light. As the father of the bride, I'd expected to be included in the main party. Instead, I found myself directed to a seat in the back row, far from where the action would take place. The wedding coordinator, a brisk woman with a clipboard who barely acknowledged my existence, ran through the ceremony several times. Each time, my only role was to walk Amanda down the aisle, hand her off to Tyler, and then immediately step aside. No words to speak, no moment to embrace my daughter. Just a human prop to be quickly moved off stage. After the rehearsal, everyone gathered for cocktails on the terrace. I noticed Amanda in deep discussion with the event planner, gesturing toward the seating chart for the reception. Wanting to clarify my own seating assignment, I approached them. "Excuse me," I said politely. "I was wondering where I'll be seated tomorrow?" The planner looked to Amanda, clearly deferring to her. Amanda gave a tight smile. "You'll be at table 7, Dad." I frowned, confused. "Table 7? Isn't that quite far from the head table?" "All the tables are lovely, Dad," she said dismissively. I pressed further. "I thought, as father of the bride, it'd be seated at the family table, with you and Tyler." Her smile became strained. "The head table is just for the bridal party. You know, bridesmaids and groomsmen. But Tyler's parents will be there," I pointed out. "They're hosting the rehearsal dinner," Amanda said, though we both knew I was paying for it. "And Patricia has been instrumental in planning everything." I felt a flush of anger rise to my face. "And what exactly do you think I've been doing? Writing checks doesn't count as participation?" The event planner discreetly excused herself, leaving Amanda and me alone in our increasingly tense conversation. "Dad, please don't make a scene," Amanda hissed. "Everything is arranged perfectly." "Perfectly for whom?" I asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it's like you're trying to hide me away. I'm your father, Amanda, the only parent you've had for 12 years. I've given everything I've got to make this day special for you." Her face hardened. "Given everything? Dad, the Caldwells could have paid for this entire wedding with what they spend on a vacation. They're just letting you contribute so you don't feel useless." The casual cruelty of her words knocked the air from my lungs. I tried to remember the last time my daughter had thanked me for anything, for the sacrifices I'd made, the hours I'd worked, the dreams I'd deferred for her benefit. "Amanda, I don't understand what's happened to you," I said quietly. "When did money and status become more important than family, than our history together?" She rolled her eyes, the gesture so dismissive it felt like a slap. "You're being dramatic, as usual. This is my day, and I just want everything to be perfect. Is that so hard to understand? Perfect meaning barely visible?" She threw up her hands in frustration. "God, Dad, not everything is about you." People nearby were starting to notice our argument. Richard Caldwell was watching with narrowed eyes from across the terrace. Patricia had stopped her conversation with the florist and was staring openly. I lowered my voice. That's rich, coming from you. I've emptied my savings, remortgaged my house, and put off retirement, all so you could have this extravagant wedding. A wedding, I might add, that bears no resemblance to the values your mother and I raised you with. At the mention of her mother, something dangerous flashed in Amanda's eyes. Don't you dare bring Mom into this, she snapped. She would have understood the importance of making the right impressions. Your mother valued authenticity above all else, I countered, my voice shaking. She would be heartbroken to see what you've become. That's the difference between you two, Amanda said, her voice turning cold. She had dreams, ambitions. She was trapped in that little life with you. I'm not going to make the same mistake. I stepped back as if Shed struck me. What are you saying? I'm saying, Amanda continued, her voice now loud enough that everyone on the terrace could hear, that your life is nothing to be proud of. You're just a teacher who lived in the same small house for 40 years. The Caldwells have connections, success, wealth, things you know nothing about. I'm trying to fit into their world now, and you're making it impossible. She drew herself up to full height, looking down at me with an expression I'd never seen before, contempt. Maybe it's better if you don't show up at all. The terrace fell silent. Tyler, who had been chatting with his groomsmen, turned to stare. Patricia's face showed shock, quickly replaced by something like satisfaction. Richard Caldwell merely raised an eyebrow, then returned to his conversation as if nothing of importance had happened. I stood perfectly still, feeling as though the ground beneath my feet had disappeared. The room seemed to spin around me, voices and faces blurring together. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what I had become in my daughter's eyes. An embarrassment, a burden, a reminder of a life she was desperate to escape. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't cause the scene she was so afraid I would make. I simply nodded once, turned, and walked away. Through the terrace doors, past the elaborate floral arrangements that had cost more than I made in a month of teaching, out to the parking lot where my old station wagon sat among the luxury vehicles. With hands that were surprisingly steady, I started the engine and drove home in silence. No radio, no calls, just the sound of the road beneath my tires and the beating of my broken heart. But somewhere on that drive, between the crushing pain and the disbelief, something else began to form. Not just sadness, but resolve. Not just hurt, but clarity. If my daughter thought my life was worthless, if she was so ashamed of everything I represented that she didn't want me at her wedding, then perhaps it was time to show her exactly what my worthless life had been providing. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the modest homeshed dismissed so carelessly, I knew exactly what I needed to do. It wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences, about respect, about finally standing up for the life I'd built and the values I'd tried to instill. Amanda had asked for something very specific, and I was going to give her exactly what she asked for. I slept surprisingly well that night. Perhaps it was the clarity that comes with making a difficult but necessary decision. When I woke the next morning, the day after being told my life was worthless by my only child, I felt a strange calm. The pain was still there, a hollow ache behind my ribs, but it no longer controlled me. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd helped Amanda with her homework for years, and began to make a list. Every vendor, every service, every element of the wedding that my worthless life had been funding. Next to each item, I wrote the amount I'd paid and whether the final payment had been made or was still pending. The total was staggering. $127,000. More than twice my annual salary as a senior teacher. Money that represented years of careful saving, plus the additional debt I'd taken on by refinancing my home. I picked up my phone and called my old friend Jerry, who had practiced law for 30 years before retiring. He answered on the third ring, his voice warm and familiar. Everett, how are you? Isn't the big day tomorrow? The wedding is tomorrow, I confirmed. But I'm calling for some legal advice, if you don't mind. I explained the situation as factually as possible, leaving out the emotional details. Jerry listened without interrupting, then asked a few pointed questions. So essentially, you've been making payments directly to these vendors, but no contracts were signed in your name? He clarified. Everything was arranged by your daughter and future in-laws, with you simply providing the funding? That's right, I confirmed. My name isn't on any paperwork. I've just been writing checks. Jerry was silent for a moment, thinking. Then, from a strictly legal perspective, you're under no obligation to make any final payments. The contracts are between the vendors and whoever signed the paperwork, presumably your daughter or the Caldwells. And the deposits I've already made? Those were gifts, essentially. You can't get them back unless the vendors are willing to refund them, which is unlikely at this late date. I thanked him for his advice, and we chatted briefly about getting together for fishing sometime soon, something I'd always wanted to do but never seemed to find the time for. As we said goodbye, Jerry hesitated. Everett, as your friend, not your lawyer, are you sure about this? It's a pretty drastic step. I'm sure, I said quietly. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way. After hanging up, I made my second call of the day to my bank. Janet, the loan officer who'd processed my home refinancing, was surprised to hear from me. Everett, is everything all right? The funds were transferred to your account last week. That's what I'm calling about, Janet. I need to cancel the remaining vendor payments scheduled from my account. She sounded concerned. But isn't the wedding tomorrow? There's been a change of plans, I said simply. After the bank, I methodically contacted every vendor, still expecting final payment. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the photographer, the band. One by one, I explained that I would no longer be covering the costs as previously arranged. Some were understanding, others were less so. All of them assured me they'd be contacting the bride immediately. My last call was to the wedding coordinator. The same woman would barely acknowledge my existence at the rehearsal. Mr. Wilson, she began sharply when I explained the situation. This is highly irregular. The event is less than 36 hours away. I'm aware of the timing, I replied calmly. But as I was informed last night, my involvement is no longer required or desired. But the financial commitments were made without any formal agreement on my part. I finished for her. I've been advised of my legal position. If the bride or groom wishes to proceed, they are welcome to make alternative payment arrangements directly. After completing all the calls, I checked my bank account. The money that hadn't yet been spent, over $70,000, had been reclaimed. Not enough to fully repay the additional mortgage I'd taken on, but enough to secure my retirement and maintain the home that held so many memories of Sarah. Next, I went to my contacts and composed a simple text message to Amanda. As requested, I won't be attending. Good luck with everything. I pressed send, then turned off my phone. I didn't want to deal with the barrage of calls and messages that would inevitably follow. Instead, I packed a small bag with fishing gear, some comfortable clothes, and basic supplies. There was a cabin by the lake, about 3 hours north, a place I'd always wanted to visit, but never had. I'd booked it that morning, using a small portion of the reclaimed wedding funds. Before leaving, I walked through my modest home, the one Amanda had been so ashamed of. In the study, I paused before the wall of photographs chronicling our life together, her first steps, school plays, graduation, the two of us learning to navigate life without Sarah. I wondered if she'd truly forgotten what these moments meant, or if she'd simply decided they weren't valuable enough for her new life. In my bedroom, I opened the drawer of my nightstand and took out Sarah's wedding ring, which I'd kept all these years. For a moment, I held it in my palm, remembering how she'd insisted on a simple band because anything more expensive would mean less for our daughter's college fund. She had always been able to distinguish between what glittered and what truly mattered. Somewhere along the way, our daughter had lost that ability. I placed the ring back in the drawer, locked the house, and drove away, just as the late afternoon sun was beginning to fade. By the time my phone began to explode with calls an hour later, I was already well on my way to the cabin, which, I'd been delighted to learn, had no cell service at all. For the next 2 days, I fished on the quiet lake. I read books I'd been meaning to get to for years. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and watched the sunrise, something Sarah and I had loved to do together. And for the first time since losing her, I felt a strange sense of peace, as if I'd finally honored the values we'd shared by refusing to be devalued any longer. On Sunday evening, when I knew the wedding would be over, I packed up the cabin and drove home, unsure of what awaited me, but certain I'd done what was necessary, not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect. Not to hurt my daughter, but to remind her of the person I'd raised her to be. What I didn't expect was to find Tyler Caldwell sitting on my front porch when I pulled into the driveway, looking nothing like the confident young man I'd met months ago. Tyler stood as I approached, his usually immaculate appearance noticeably disheveled. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, with dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he'd had little sleep. "Mr. Wilson," he said, extending a hand that I reluctantly shook. "Thank you for seeing me." "I haven't agreed to see you yet," I pointed out, unlocking my front door. "But you're here now. You might as well come in." Inside, I set down my fishing gear and motioned for Tyler to take a seat at the kitchen table. I filled the kettle for tea, a habit I developed during the quiet evenings after Sarah passed. Something about the ritual had always helped me think clearly. "Where's Amanda?" I asked, keeping my back to him as I gathered mugs and tea bags. "At her apartment," he replied. She doesn't know I'm here." This surprised me enough that I turned to look at him. Her new husband, secretly visiting the father she'd rejected. Interesting. "The wedding was a disaster," Tyler blurted out, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "When the venue called on Friday evening saying you'd canceled the final payment, everything fell apart." I set the mugs on the table and took a seat across from him. "I imagine that was inconvenient." Tyler let out a humorless laugh. "Inconvenient doesn't begin to cover it. The venue threatened to cancel entirely unless we paid the balance immediately in cash. My parents had to withdraw $50,000 from their accounts on short notice. The caterer reduced the menu to basically glorified finger food. Half the flowers never arrived. The band canceled outright." I remained silent, letting him continue. "We had to move the reception to my parents' backyard. My mom was. Well, she was furious, to put it mildly. She blamed Amanda, said she should have managed you better." He winced at his own words. "Sorry, that came out wrong." "No, I think that came out exactly right," I replied calmly, sipping my tea. "Your mother believes Amanda should have managed me like an asset or a liability, not treated me like a father." That's very illuminating. Tyler had the grace to look ashamed. Most of the guests left early. Photos are already circulating online. It wasn't the statement event everyone expected. He paused, studying me. "You don't seem surprised." "I'm not." "Were you trying to punish Amanda?" he asked, a slight edge entering his voice. I considered the question carefully. "No, Tyler. I was simply giving her what she asked for. She made it clear my presence, my life, was an embarrassment. Nothing to be proud of, I believe were her exact words. So I removed myself, and everything my worthless life was providing." Tyler flinched. "I was there. I heard what she said. I should have stepped in, but I was shocked. The Amanda I fell in love with would never have spoken to anyone that way, let alone her father." This caught my attention. "The Amanda you fell in love with?" He looked down at his untouched tea. "When I met Amanda, she was confident but kind, ambitious but grounded. She talked about her dad, the dedicated teacher, with such pride." He shook his head. "Then she met my parents, and something changed. It was gradual at first, but by the time the wedding planning started in earnest, she was like a different person. Obsessed with impressions, status, what other people would think." "And that bothered you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "You come from that world." Tyler met my gaze directly. "My parents' world isn't as wonderful as Amanda seems to think. My father works 80-hour weeks and barely knows his own children. My mother's entire identity is wrapped up in maintaining appearances. I wanted something different with Amanda, something real." I leaned back in my chair, reassessing the young man before me. "Why are you telling me this, Tyler?" He hesitated, then spoke with unexpected vulnerability. "I guess I'm trying to understand how you did it. Raised this amazing woman I fell in love with. The one who quoted To Kill a Mockingbird when we discussed ethics on our third date. The one who teared up telling me how you attended every single school event, even while working 3 jobs. That Amanda seems gone, and I don't know if the woman I married is the one I thought she was." The kettle whistled, breaking the heavy silence that followed his confession. I stood to turn it off, using the moment to gather my thoughts. When I returned to the table, I studied Tyler closely. "Have you discussed this with Amanda?" He shook his head. "We haven't really talked since the wedding. She's been on the phone constantly, doing damage control with guests, arguing with my mother. When she does speak to me, it's just to complain about you." I nodded, unsurprised. Amanda always did have a tendency to focus on external factors when things went wrong. Sarah and I had tried to teach her accountability, but clearly those lessons hadn't stuck. "What do you want from me, Tyler?" I asked finally. "Forgiveness for Amanda? Advice for your marriage? Both seem premature?" He considered the question. I want to know if the Amanda I fell in love with is still in there somewhere. And if so, how to reach her." For the first time since he'd arrived, I felt a flicker of sympathy for the young man. He'd married my daughter expecting one person and discovered another too late. "Amanda has lost her way," I said gently. "It happened gradually, as these things often do. The values her mother and I tried to instill, simplicity, integrity, gratitude, they got buried under new priorities." "How did it happen?" he asked, sounding genuinely perplexed. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. She started measuring her worth by the wrong metrics. Income instead of impact. Status instead of substance. The trappings of success instead of the content of her character. I looked around my modest kitchen, the homeshed rejected. Sometimes it's easier to be dazzled by what glitters than to appreciate what endures. Tyler nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. So what happens now? Can she find her way back? I honestly don't know, I admitted. That depends on Amanda. And perhaps on you too. Me? You're at a crossroads, Tyler. You can continue enabling the person Amanda is becoming, or you can stand for the values that attracted you to her in the first place. It won't be easy, and there's no guarantee of success. He seemed to absorb this, turning the mug between his hands. Your wife, Sarah, what would she have done in this situation? The question caught me off guard, bringing a lump to my throat. After a moment, I answered truthfully. Sarah believed in meeting cruelty with kindness, but never with weakness. She would have given Amanda space to face the consequences of her choices, then left the door open for reconciliation when real remorse came. Tyler stood, finally looking like the confident young man I'd first met. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I have a lot to think about. As I walked him to the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I don't think your life is nothing to be proud of. Teaching history for 40 years, raising a daughter alone after losing your wife, most men couldn't have done it. I hope one day Amanda remembers who taught her what real success looks like. After he left, I sat on my front porch for a long time, watching the neighborhood children play across the street. I thought about Amanda, wondering if she'd find her way back to herself, wondering if I'd ever see my daughter truly happy and at peace with who she was and where she came from. I didn't have those answers yet, but as the evening settled around my small, mortgage-burdened house, the one filled with 40 years of memories, both painful and precious, I knew I'd made the right decision. Not just for myself, but ultimately for Amanda, too. What I didn't expect was how soon that decision would bear fruit, or the form that fruit would take. 2 months after the wedding that wasn't, I was grading papers at my kitchen table when I heard a knock at the door. It was a Sunday afternoon in early autumn, the kind of crisp, golden day that Sarah had loved best. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Amanda stood on the porch, alone. Her appearance shocked me. Gone was the perfectly polished woman who had sneered at my life choices. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a sweater I'd given her for Christmas years ago. Most striking were her eyes, red-rimmed and swollen, as if she'd been crying for hours. "Dad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside to let her in, my heart hammering in my chest. This was the first time I'd seen her since that devastating night at the rehearsal dinner. We'd exchanged no calls, no messages, complete silence. She entered hesitantly, glancing around the living room as if seeing it for the first time. Her eyes lingered on the family photos, the worn but comfortable furniture, the books lining the shelves, things she had recently dismissed as embarrassing but now seemed to be drinking in. "Would you like some tea?" I asked, unsure how to begin. She nodded, and I retreated to the kitchen, giving us both a moment to collect ourselves. When I returned with 2 steaming mugs, Amanda was standing by the fireplace, holding a framed photo of her mother. "I remember when this was taken," she said softly. "At the lake, the summer before she got sick." "You were 12, I confirmed, setting the mugs down. "Your mother insisted on going camping, even though the doctor had already found the lump. She didn't want to waste a moment of that summer." Amanda replaced the photo carefully, then turned to face me. Her hands were trembling. "Dad, I came to say I'm sorry," she began, her voice breaking on the last word. "But sorry doesn't even begin to cover what I did to you." What I said. She took a shaky breath. "I was horrible, cruel, ungrateful. I don't even recognize the person I became." I gestured for her to sit, and we both settled on the couch, a careful distance between us. "What happened, Amanda?" I asked quietly. She wiped at her eyes. "After the wedding. Disaster. Tyler's parents blamed me. Said I'd failed to handle you properly. As if you were some inconvenient detail to be managed." Her face crumpled. "And the worst part is, that's exactly how I'd been treating you. Like an embarrassment. A problem." She looked down at her hands. "The Caldwells have barely spoken to me since. Patricia makes these cutting remarks at family dinners about people who don't know their place. About how some people just aren't meant for their world." "And Tyler?" I asked carefully. A complex expression crossed her face. "Tyler's been different since the wedding. More distant with his parents. More thoughtful. He started asking me questions about my childhood, about you and Mom, about what I really want from life. She gave a sad smile. We're in counseling, trying to figure out if we're building a marriage on the right foundation. Her eyes met mine, filled with shame and regret. Dad, somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I got so caught up in impressing the Caldwells, in fitting into their world, that I forgot everything you and Mom taught me about what really matters. I stayed silent, letting her continue. Seeing you drive away that night, she shuddered. It was like waking up from a trance. I suddenly saw myself through your eyes, and I was horrified. The things I said to you. Amanda shook her head, tears flowing freely now. Your life is nothing to be proud of? How could I say that? You, who worked 3 jobs to put me through college, who never missed a single school event, who taught me to think critically, to stand up for what's right, to judge people by their character, not their bank accounts. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her as I had when she was small, but something held me back. This moment of reckoning was necessary, however painful. When she could speak again, Amanda looked at me with raw honesty. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Dad. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that I see now what I became, and I'm trying to find my way back to the person you and Mom raised me to be. Finally, I spoke, choosing my words carefully. What made you come today, after 2 months? She hesitated. Tyler showed me something yesterday. He'd been researching online and found. She paused, seeming unsure how to continue. Found what? A scholarship fund, at Lincoln High. The Sarah Wilson Memorial Scholarship for Underprivileged Students, established 2 months ago, by you. I nodded slowly. After reclaiming the wedding money, Id made a decision about how to honor both Sarah and the values Wed shared. $60,000, the bulk of what Id recovered, had gone to establish a scholarship in her name at the school where Id taught for 4 decades. It would help students who, like Amanda once was, had potential but limited means. You used the wedding money to help students? Amanda asked, her voice filled with wonder. It seemed fitting, I replied simply. Your mother always believed education was the greatest gift we could give. Not just to you, but to all children. Fresh tears spilled down Amanda's cheeks. That's so much more meaningful than anything we had planned for that ridiculous wedding. A silence fell between us, not entirely uncomfortable. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard where Amanda had once played. Dad, she finally said, her voice small. Is there any way we could start again? Try to rebuild what I destroyed? I studied my daughter's face, seeing in it echoes of the little girl who had once held my hand at her mother's funeral, of the teenager who'd proudly introduced me to her friends, of the young woman who'd hugged me tight at her college graduation and whispered thank you for everything. I also saw something new, genuine remorse, hard-earned wisdom, and the beginnings of the kind of humility that comes only through painful self-recognition. Rebuilding takes time, Amanda, I said gently. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend overnight. But I believe in second chances. Your mother did too. For the first time that afternoon, Amanda smiled a real smile, tinged with sadness but also hope. Then, we'll take it slow. One day at a time. I nodded, finally reaching out to cover her hand with mine. One day at a time. We talked for hours after that, more openly than we had in years. Amanda shared how the wedding disaster had actually become a clarifying moment in her relationship with Tyler, forcing them to examine what they truly valued and wanted from their life together. She told me how Shed started volunteering at a literacy program, teaching adults to read, finding meaning in service rather than status. As evening fell, I walked her to the door. Before leaving, she turned to me. You know, that old saying is true, she said thoughtfully. Sometimes you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone. I nearly lost the most important relationship in my life because I couldn't see its true value. I smiled at my daughter, the real Amanda, finally returned to herself. The most valuable things rarely come with price tags attached. That's something your mother understood better than anyone. After Amanda left, I sat on my porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. I thought about Sarah, about the modest but meaningful life Wed built together, about the daughter Wed raised who had lost her way but found it again. In the end, the greatest revenge against cruelty isn't more cruelty. It's holding firm to your values and letting natural consequences unfold. It's creating meaning from pain. It's transforming rejection into growth. My life was indeed something to be proud of, not because of money or status or impressive connections, but because of the lives I'd touched as a teacher, a husband, and a father. Amanda was beginning to understand that now. And in that understanding lay the seeds of healing for us both. Have you ever had to stand up for your own worth when someone tried to diminish you? How did you respond to being undervalued by someone you love? I'd appreciate if you'd share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find meaning in it. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope it brings some wisdom to your own relationships. Remember, true worth isn't measured by what you own, but by the lives you touch.